You're listening to the Reflective Teacher Podcast, and this is episode number 6. I'm Selena Woodward, and I'm an English and drama teacher, university lecturer, and with edufolios.org, a big-time reflective practitioner. So how can reflective practice help you grow your teaching skills, fall in love with your profession all over again, and help you nail accreditation and teacher registration with less stress and less work? Well, this is the Reflective Teacher Podcast. Hi and welcome. This week, as I discussed previously, we're going to talk about fear. We're going to discuss the 5 biggest fears that stop people heading for their next career stage or even beginning the process of reflective practice. It is a fear. I'm sure of that, even when I look through my notes and my research to see what these excuses, is another word we could use, are listed as. And I want you to listen today with an open mind, because I'm sure that some of the things I say today may spark in you a feeling of rebellion, well, it's easy for you to say, Selena, moment. And I want you to be aware of that as we talk really honestly today about those fears and about those barriers. As an educator, it's my job to identify barriers to learning for my students, to identify them and then select pedagogical approaches in my classroom to help them overcome them so that they can improve and grow. And so in this podcast, I'm attempting to do the same thing for you, based on what you've been telling me about what's stopping you from reflecting on your practice, from going for the next career stage. I want you to think about the fact that your success, whether you perceive yourself to be successful or to fail, may actually only require a bit of a shift in your mindset, that maybe the excuses or the fears that stop you moving forward can be rationalized and can be reframed. That sometimes we are so mired up in the stress and the discomfort that we feel around these moments of growth, because that's what they are. We're being asked to push ourselves forward, and they should feel a little uncomfortable. And in those moments, sometimes we can't solve the problem because we're seeing it as a problem. What on earth am I talking about? Well, Einstein said you cannot solve a problem from the same level of consciousness that created it. And I guess what I'm saying to you is, as you hear these 5 fears or these 5 reasons why we can't move forward, I need you to shift your consciousness. If you're listening, you hear me say it and you think, yeah, well, that is a problem, Selena, and then you're still focused on the problem and not the solution. You could argue that if your brain is so busy looking at the problem, it's really hard to see the solution. And I want you to open your mind to the idea that there may be a different way to view these things. Okay, so let's not imagine what the barriers are, what could go wrong. Let's look at what might happen, what might go right. We're going to reframe this whole concept we're going to reframe the whole concept of this accreditation, career stage, reflective process. I literally mean that. We need to stop seeing it as a thing that we have to do to prove ourselves. That is not what we believe at Edufolios. This process of reflection is about you, and more importantly, it's about the students in your classroom and the impact that you're having on those students. It's about what I just said at the beginning of this podcast. It's about your ability to identify their learning strengths and their learning barriers and use all of your knowledge, skills, and expertise to remove those barriers to help them grow and thrive. That's what I believe my job as an educator is, to have an impact on them and their future. Why wouldn't you want to write about how you're doing that? If you reframe accreditation, going for proficiency, reflective practice as a journal of your journey as an educator, and you remove the pressure of trying to hit somebody's goal or someone's target, and you focus purely on what you're doing right now, why you're doing it, and what the impact is, something really interesting starts to happen. And this has happened for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of users at edufolios.org. The data starts telling you a story. It starts telling you that you have hit some highly accomplished focus areas when you haven't yet been brave enough to apply for full registration. It tells you that you have some gaps that you need to fill in, that you're avoiding certain things, and it pushes you to help you grow. So as we think about these 5 fears, 5 reasons that we might be avoiding reflecting and moving to the next career stage, we're going to think about how we can reframe this conversation and how we need to make sure that we're consciously choosing to look for solutions and not focus on the problems. Okay, here we go. The first one I want to address is a statement I hear a lot from new teachers. I haven't been doing this long enough to even consider applying for that career stage, whether that's highly accomplished, lead, or proficiency. I can't be ready yet, can I? I haven't been doing this long enough to even consider that I am able to do that career stage. I can't possibly be ready to do that yet, can I? How do you know? Are you just focusing on a fear? And it's an interesting cultural fear. You might, as you know, I'm British originally, but there is a culture of there is a culture of tall poppy syndrome, isn't there? A funny story, when I first came to Australia, I thought you were referring to World War II poppies. I had no idea what tall poppy syndrome was. It's okay to be really good at your job. We should be celebrating that because we learn from each other from sharing stories. So even if you're not ready yet, it's important to consider where you want to go. Remember, the first podcast in this series is about setting goals. Even if you feel like you might not be ready, you don't know yet. You haven't given yourself the opportunity to look at this. And the reality is, for most of us, this journey of growth started the day you entered university and began your studies as a trainee teacher. And it hasn't ended yet. This journey will never end. You are always learning. You are always developing mastery. There are too many factors in teaching to ever be finished. It's not going to happen that way. We're always growing and changing. And in terms of being ready, you won't know that until you start reflecting on your practice and considering and getting to know what the focus areas state in them. You won't know. And if you try and reframe this away from accreditation and paperwork and hoop jumping, you will find fairly quickly that you can do that. You can reflect on your practice and you can discover what you know, what your strengths are, and what you need to work on. And that, my friends, is the most important part of the accreditation process. The second one I want to look at is I don't have any artifacts. How on earth can I pull together an evidence portfolio if I don't even have any evidence? Okay, I don't have any artifacts. First of all, let's look at this word artifact. We hear a lot about having high quality artifacts in our portfolios. And a lot of people I've spoken to have told me that they know what an artifact is. They're just not entirely sure what a high quality artifact looks like or what on earth they would do with one. So let's start by thinking about artifacts. Now, artifacts, according to Eitzel, and this is their quote, is an individual piece of evidence and or linked extracts which demonstrate a teacher's achievement against one or more descriptors. And their examples are lesson plans, observation reports, letters to parents, student samples of work, etc. They are evidence or extracts that demonstrate your achievement against one or more descriptors. Okay, so don't have any artifacts. Are you sure about that? If I walked into your classroom right now and grabbed the literacy books, or if I'm Year 9 English, their English books, and I opened it and they've been working on a unit of descriptive writing, are you telling me that if I open their exercise book, there is no evidence in there of their progress and of their learning? Are you telling me that if I opened your Excel spreadsheet or went into your grade book, there would be no evidence there of assessment? Are you telling me that if I looked in your planner, there would be no evidence of planning and curriculum knowledge? Are you sure that you don't have any artifacts? The reality is that you're doing everything you already need to be doing. You're surrounded by the artifacts that you're looking for. You just haven't understood that that's what they are. And this goes back to that second podcast I did about focus areas, the difference between graduate and proficient, and the third one I did about cracking the focus area code. Once you learn to understand the language, you realize very quickly that this isn't something extra. It's what you're doing already. It's what you do every day. It's your job. You are a teacher, and the standards are merely a reflection of what you do every day. And all you need to do is pause, think, and reflect. What is the purpose of being an educator? It's the impact that you're having on your students. Or if it's highly accomplished, the impact you're having on your students and your colleagues, and at LEAD, the impact you're having on your students, your colleagues, and your site. At graduate, as a uni student, it's the impact on yourself of your understanding of the potential to use all of this new learning in a classroom. Impact. If you can remember that as you're working throughout your day, as you're writing on your whiteboard, if you see something there that shows where we were starting, where we were going, and where we've ended up, take a photograph. If you open up a student's book and you look over the last 7 weeks and you can see their descriptive sentence has gone from 4 words to 10 and it has a beautiful simile in it, let's get a photo of before and after. You've got everything you need already. So what we need to do here is understand that this isn't more work. You're not needing to go around grabbing artifacts and storing them in a box. When you are reflecting repeatedly and following a conscious choice to talk about what you're doing in your classroom, you will naturally find these artifacts because they're around you all the time. As long as you focus on what the impact is that you're having on whomever it is the artifact demonstrates an impact, you will definitely hit focus area descriptors at a specific career stage. Number 3, and this one breaks my heart a little bit. Selena, I'm busy surviving right now. I can't do this reflective practice. I don't have time. And it's just too hard. I don't know if I know what I'm doing yet. I'm surviving. It's just I don't have time because I'm surviving. We don't want you to survive. We want you to thrive. And if you're feeling like you're surviving and that you've got no time to do this because you're not sure you're doing a good enough job and it's all just overwhelming you, you're surviving right now, then you definitely need to stop and reflect. You most definitely do. Because somewhere you're doing too much. Somewhere you're not giving yourself enough time to reconnect with what you're doing and why. And it's not until you do that that you will stop merely surviving and you will start thriving. You will reconnect with what you're doing in your classroom and, more importantly, why and what your impact is. You will be able to reframe this survival because you will know what works and what doesn't. And you'll be able to take time back that you were putting energy into something that might not have been as efficient or as helpful as you thought. And also, if you're reflecting and connecting with other practitioners, you're going to find advice, support, and those shortcuts that I know you will want to growing. It's not too hard to pause, to write, and to reflect. You've been doing it since university, and you can continue to do it. And if you're concerned about doing that publicly, then do it in a draft. Do it where no one else can see it until you grow your confidence. Do not survive, people. Let's thrive. Let's look at why we feel like we're just surviving. Let's write about that. Let's unpack that. Let's see what we can find out about our practice. The next one I want to talk about is it's going to be so much work. I don't have time for that. Now, part of this was solved in last week's podcast, which was all about planning to reflect and reducing the cognitive load of knowing what to write about and when. And I would totally say, if this is something in your mind, go and listen to that podcast. It will definitely help you. And part of this is possibly, I like to call it the urban legend of accreditation. Sometimes the process has been described as an overwhelming thing that requires hours and hours of extra work. But this depends on how you approach this. If you wait 5 years to apply for proficient, you're going to have to think back over 5 years. It's exactly like we talked about last week. There will have been no plan, so there will have been no efficiency. There will be, where was that lesson plan? I don't know. I've got to go find it. Where was that sample of work? Did I keep their exercise book? And you're increasing the amount of work and the amount of stress. If you reflect proactively and you just share your stories of practice and let the data start telling you what's there, you will start to see patterns and you will identify opportunities where you can take one part of a post you wrote, not for accreditation, but for reflection. You can take one part of that and expand that into something that will tick all the boxes if you want to. You definitely need to think about how planning to reflect is going to make it less work. So listen to last week's podcast. And the last one, number 5, is I can't figure out how to put my evidence together and I have no idea where to start. Well, my friends, you are in luck because I know this amazing piece of software called Edufolios that will really help you with that. In my conversations with my clients, with my subscribers, with the schools we work with, the universities we work with, this is really important. Other tools out there that are not specifically designed for this niche, for reflecting on the standards, don't necessarily show you what it's going to look like. Edufolios, right from the beginning, from the minute you put a piece of evidence in, puts whatever you say into a portfolio and it does all that work for you. You just write it and tag it and the system will then say, well, here's my portfolio for this standard. Here's my portfolio for this focus area. If you have no idea where to start, go and find some examples. Go and look at other people's. We talked about this last week, didn't we? Go and find some inspiration. Don't worry about putting your evidence together until you've practiced creating evidence pieces in the first place as well. Okay? It's okay to begin by figuring out what talking about your practice looks like. It's okay to begin by getting to know the focus areas and the language and developing that and allowing our system to help show you what that could look like. Then when you're ready to apply for HA and lead, then we can start talking about how we make sure it follows the rules of phase 1 or stage 1 of the accreditation process. But please do not let the barrier of not knowing what it needs to look like or where to start be a problem, because we've got that solution here for you at edufolios.org. Come check it out. It's free for 30 days. What have you got to miss out on, huh? All of these 5 things that I hear all the time are about mindset and priority. If you truly believe that reflective practice is important, then you need to start thinking about whether or not this needs to be more of a priority. I've asked heaps of people recently, what is reflective practice and how important is it to you? And not one person has said to me that it's a waste of time. All of them have told me it's extremely important. All of them have said it's crucial. All of them have said it's something that they do all the time, but not necessarily in a way where they give themselves time to reflect deeply. Okay, it's important because it's how we grow as an educator. So do not let the mindset of a problem, of a culture of a problem, get in the way of you reflecting and growing and developing your practice. Go right now and write about something you did today. That's all you're going to do. You're going to write about something that happened today at school, and then look at that and see what you can learn from that. That is the beginnings of a great portfolio of practice at any career stage. Next week, I'm going to talk about how to write about your professional learning in a portfolio so that you can meet the requirements of your registration and your PD hours, but also turn that into the beginnings of an awesome story of practice and of growth. I look forward to seeing you on Thursday at Edufolios on Facebook, so facebook.com/Edufolios. You can access the links and details of things I've talked about in this podcast at edufolios.org/006. And you can also get in touch there and tell me your thoughts, especially if you've had any of those uncomfortable, come on, Selena, that's not realistic thoughts, and you haven't been able to move your level of consciousness. Share that with me. I'd love to talk about it. I'll see you this time next week on the Reflective Teacher Podcast.